Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and we're really excited to have round two of our candidate forums. We had a great time at the last mayor's candidate forums, and we're looking forward to another good discussion here tonight. I do want to thank the City of Issaquah TV network for being here. They did an excellent job not only recording but broadcasting it the last forum, so we'll be doing the same thing here. Just want to encourage everybody to watch that on the city's YouTube channel and then share it with your networks and your friends. Make sure people get a chance to watch. And do want to wave hello to all 10 million people watching at home. So great. So we're going to start off with just a couple of reminders about the forums. Nina alluded to it. After tonight's forum on September 20th, we're going to have the County Council Candidates Forum. And then Wednesday, October 18th, will be another mayoral candidate forum with the final two candidates at that point in time. Just a reminder tonight, our format and our mission for having these events is to provide a fair, balanced venue where you all can hear directly from the candidates, get to know them as a person, get their take on the issues, and make a really informed decision about who they are and what they stand for. We, like Nina said, we've been collecting questions from the community since the end of June, and we've had them in the following categories for the candidates today. Growth, traffic and transportation, the environment, public safety, the city budget, infrastructure, public and human services, and other. So we have distilled down the submissions into 7 questions for tonight. But before we get into the question and answer round, we're actually going to meet 3 city council candidates here who are running for seats but without an opponent. Even though they are running unopposed, we felt it was important for them to get some time here to tell the voting community who they are, talk a little bit about why you're running or running again for city council, and just share anything you'd like. We're going to give you 5 minutes each to talk about that, and we'll just go here from right to left as we do that. So first here we have Justin Walsh. I just had the pleasure of meeting Justin here for the first time tonight. Justin has served as a member of the City of Issaquah Planning Policy Commission. He's also served as chair of the King County Civil Rights Commission. He volunteers with Team Child, a nonprofit focused on upholding the legal rights for youth to ensure they have opportunities to succeed. Prior to holding his position on the Planning Policy Commission, he was a volunteer firefighter with Eastside Fire and Rescue. So Justin, why don't you take 5 minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
All right, thank you, Nate. Thank you to the Highlands Council for putting this on, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight. It's very important that people are involved in the democratic process and get to know their candidates. Like Nate said, I've been involved in this city and the region for several years in a wide variety of capacities. Only recently did I give up my chairing of the King County Civil Rights Commission, where I spent a total of 9 years working on issues of equity and social justice. But that's not why I'm running. The volunteerism isn't why I'm running. In September 2014, I was living here and I was working in Lower Queen Anne in Seattle. So every morning I had a choice. I could wake up very early in the morning and get out the door before the traffic hit, or I could sit in the traffic that flowed essentially from my door and continued until I parked my car and went to my desk. Every day that added 2 to 3 hours to my life. I would come back and I would sit on Front Street, and I would sit on Front Street, and I would sit on Front Street. So I was living in Issaquah, but I wasn't able to live in Issaquah. I decided to get involved and figure out how to change this. Now I'm fortunate. I have a job that's portable. I'm an attorney here. And in October 2014, I decided that I needed to open my law firm in Issaquah and get rid of that commute. Now I walk to work. Each year I reclaim 21 days of my life that I didn't have before just by virtue of not having to sit in traffic. And I get the joy of helping local small businesses fulfill their dreams as well and reclaim some of their lives. But that's not everyone. Traffic in Issaquah is one of our biggest problems, and it's also one of the biggest problems facing the region as a whole. Statewide, this type of congestion costs us over $3 billion, with the great bulk of that being in the greater Puget Sound area. Now, we in Issaquah are stuck in the middle of this. People use us as a thoroughfare to get to Sammamish. They use us to get to Maple Valley. but they don't pay taxes in Issaquah. They don't support our infrastructure. Our traffic and the lack of the transportation infrastructure and regional traffic as a whole have also led to companies shying away from Issaquah, and that takes away the opportunity for other people to have that same ability to reduce their commute and to be a member of the community. When you take people out of the community and you put them in their cars for 2 to 3 hours a day, you're lowering the quality of life not just for that person, but for the community as a whole. They're not able to volunteer. They're not able to participate in their kids' activities. They're not able to socialize and walk down Front Street and enjoy blues at the gas station or the concerts in the park on the green. Now, we live in a big, small town. It's a town that's rich with culture. It's got amazing restaurants, and it's got community members who really give their all to make Issaquah a place that we all want to live. We have Issaquah Schools Foundation that brings up our youth and creates the next generation of leaders, and we have Eastside Baby Corner and the Food and Clothing Bank, volunteer-driven organizations that help those in need. It's the people here that make our community great, and I want to keep them here and make sure that they're spending as much time in the community as they can, and that means fixing the infrastructure. It means getting jobs in Issaquah that take the people off the roads. We need to reduce the housing prices so that people can afford to live here, so that our teachers can live here. And we need to ensure all of this growth is managed in a way that maintains the character of our neighborhoods and which doesn't detract from the quality of life we have here. So to do this, we need to ensure that the infrastructure that's in place to support the growth comes before the growth happens. We need to maintain our roads, our public transportation, and increase other modes of transportation to have a multimodal model that does everything it can to take the trips off the roads. We need to stay ahead of the growth. We need to make sure our schools are built ahead of the capacity. We're having schools that are built with portables already in place, and that's not sticking ahead of the curve. And we need to create affordable spaces for people to live and work within the city and ensure that our human services come along with it. Now, we can't leave the residents of our city, these people that make our big, small town amazing, we can't leave them behind, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Next, we have Stacy Goodman, and Stacy was initially appointed to the council in March of 2011 to fill a vacant seat. The following November, she ran and was re-elected to finish that term, and then elected to a full term in 2013. Stacy is currently in her second year serving as the council president, and she works as an attorney here locally in Issaquah. So, Stacy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Nate. So, hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm really pleased to see everybody here. Thank you all for coming, and I would like to thank the Highlands Council and everyone who helped organize this event. It's really a great event, particularly since we have the loss of our newspaper this past year. So like Nate says, I've served on the council for 6.5 years. I've also been an Issaquah Highlands resident for the past 12 years, so for those of you who live here, I am your neighbor. I'm also an attorney practicing in Issaquah. I've been practicing for 10 years. Prior to law school, from 1996 to 2004, I was a reporter and editor at the Issaquah Press, so I like to think that I know the community very well. And we have a beautiful community, don't we? I mean, that's why most of us are here. We have amazing green hillsides, lots of outdoor amenities, trails, parks, schools. We have fabulous schools. That's two of the things that brought me to this community in 1989 were the schools and the parks. As Nate said, I was appointed to fill a vacancy in 2011 on the council, and I really love serving on the council. I love policy. I love the process of making policy. I actually like long meetings. People don't. During the appointment process, I spoke to the need to revitalize Lake Sammamish State Park because during the time since 1989 that I moved here, the park had become pretty run down and not well maintained. Mark Mullett was on the council at the time, and he told me that he was very inspired by my interest in revitalizing the park. So after he became a state senator, Mark became the champion for Lake Sammamish State Park, and we have since received millions of dollars that have been used to revitalize the state park with a new bathhouse and a beach and more. The Friends of Lake Sammamish group was also formed, and they worked really hard to get us a $1 million playground. If you haven't visited it, it's just really, really amazing. During my time on the council, I fought for that Friends group to get additional funding from the city budget so that they could afford to have a part-time executive director. And that Friends group is doing really well, and they and Mark are really to be credited for all of the great changes at the park. But I will say that I'm very proud to have played a very, very small role in those changes, even though my role may have been just simply to inspire Mark. And that's really what I love about serving on the city council. I really love making a difference. Last year, after being told by city leaders that they had tried for 7 years to ban pass-through truck traffic from downtown city streets, I led the effort to have that truck traffic banned from those city streets, and that took only 3 months. I also last year proposed the development moratorium that is going on right now. I did that as a last resort, and only after I heard overwhelmingly from you, our community, that you are not happy with the pace and quality of development on the valley floor. I have not heard that level of anger since we were talking about the bypass. But since there was no plan to address the community's concerns about our Central Issaquah plan, I decided it was time to take a pause, and the council unanimously approved. The moratorium is scheduled to be in effect until the end of the year, when we expect to have revised the plan in such a way that we will get the development that we envision, not just what we allow. I also took the step 1.5 years ago and proposed that we finally cut funding to the operator of the senior center, and the senior center is now being operated temporarily by the city while we figure out what permanent management might look like. The other tough issue, as you all know, is traffic. I pledge to you that I will elevate and continue to elevate traffic and transportation issues to be the #1 priority that they deserve to be, because they have been the #1 priority, the #1 issue for 20 years. For too long, we have blamed our traffic problems solely on regional pass-through traffic. But it's time that we take ownership of the traffic we create and also determine how we can make a more pleasant experience for all of you, the people who live here, so that you can drive, walk, and bicycle through Issaquah much more easily and much more pleasantly. I want you to know that, too, for Issaquah Highlands, the issue currently is speeding with regards to traffic, and I pledge to ensure that your issues are addressed as I help to bring the speeding issue to the forefront and help to make, you recently had the speeding meeting with the city, and I helped to make that happen. So, you know, I work for you. Serving on the council, I work for you. And I would like to say that I'm out in the community every single day meeting with you, but like most of you, I have a day job, and so I'm at work. I like to hear from you. I want to hear when you have concerns. I want to hear when you have questions. I want to hear when you just want to chat about issues and about solutions. My email address is on the city website. My personal cell phone is on the city website. You email me, you call me, I will get back to you, I will meet with you, and I'm excited to serve you for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. You got to love local electeds. One of the few places you'll hear somebody say they like long meetings. So that's great.
Totally likes longer ones.
Up next is Tola Martz. Tola is finishing out his second term on the city council and seeking his third this fall. During his time on the council, he's been the chair of the Council Services and Safety Committee since 2015. He was also chair of the Council Land and Shore Committee from 2010 to 2011 and served as council president in 2012. Tola, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Nate. So why am I here? One of the reasons that I'm here is actually sitting in the back, my 19-year-old daughter, Sophie. And Sophie's starting her sophomore year down at Santa Clara. And I wonder about what our city's going to look like in 20 years for her. Frankly, I wonder what our city's going to look like in 3 years for her. I wonder if when she comes back to town, if she'll be able to afford to live here. I wonder if she'll be able to find a job here. I wonder if she'll have to go on long commutes into Seattle. And that long term, where is our community headed? What will it look like in 20 years is really what motivated me 8 years ago and continues to motivate me today. I've talked about in the past, I grew up in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, which had its heyday in the 70s and early 80s, and then it didn't make that transition to a sustainable, balanced community. It didn't have the jobs. It stayed a bedroom community. They started failing school bonds and school levies, and now you can get a very, very nice house right on White Bear Lake for about $250. which I don't think you can get a garage here for $250. So growth is obviously the paramount issue that we have in front of us, and it's the paramount issue for this entire area. This is the 5th fastest growing metro in the United States, and the other metros that are faster growing are all big southern cities that can sprawl out as wide as they want. It's Phoenix and Dallas and Houston and Atlanta. They can grow, they can have 5 rings of suburbs, 6 rings of suburbs. We can't do that here, but people are still coming. And so you've heard a little bit about traffic tonight. You're going to hear a lot more about traffic tonight. Schools are the other big issue, particularly for folks here in the Highlands. We had a really unusual situation. I came out of the schools side of things, and I came out of PTA and school boundary review committees and whatnot, and the issue was really that the generation numbers, people really want to live in the Highlands. They want to bring their kids here. They want to go to the Issaquah schools. So if you look at typical house anywhere in the Issaquah School District, typically generates about 0.3 students per household, and an apartment generates 0.1. Well, not in the Highlands. In the Highlands, it's 1 student per house, and it's 0.3 students per apartment. And they didn't expect that, and that's why Grand Ridge is so full, and that's why they're continuing to struggle and find to this day what they're going to do with all the additional growth that continues to come. The other big issue that we're facing that we don't talk about quite as much is the tax burden. And one of the things that I've heard this summer from a lot of people is a real tax fatigue. I think that Sound Transit 3 is winding up costing folks a lot more than they expected, and I think it's one of the reasons why the arts tax, the 0.1% tax increase failed. Because I think there is that fatigue, and it's really important because there's a levy coming up this fall called the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, and it touches almost every human services activity in King County. For those who don't know, King County has no money, and so all the responsibility for social services rolls downhill to the municipalities. And so where they do have money is in things like these levies. So I'm concerned about voter fatigue about taxes and how it's going to translate into public policy and response to opportunities and challenges in front of us. So what do we do about it? Well, it starts with having a balanced community. And for me, 8 years ago, I talked about workforce housing and living wage jobs. That continues to be the preeminent issue for managing our growth going forward. We have to have jobs for the people who live here, and we have to have housing for the people who work here, because otherwise we just fill up our freeways and we can't keep ahead of things in terms of getting transit. I think we're going to see a push to expand the urban growth boundary line. What I don't want to see is housing going all the way up to the pass. I don't want to see a whole slew of new communities sprawling all the way out to the pass. I think we may wind up seeing Fall City and Preston get incorporated into the urban growth boundary line down the road, but we're going to have to think outside of traditional methods for responding to the growth that continues to come. In conclusion, I'd like you to think about, we think about 20 years from now, we've got 2 Issaquahs, right? One is dense, with transit, with a good green necklace that you can see from miles away, with a range of housing and a range of jobs. That's the way we can respond to the ongoing growth. The other Issaquah would be, as I said, sprawling out to the pass with nameless suburb after nameless suburb, concrete everywhere, McMansions on the hills, and just retail jobs. So let's make sure we get that growth, that we get to manage growth so that we get the Issaquah that responds well to what's coming. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and let's give a round of applause to these folks for their continued service. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to ask these folks to sit down, and we'll have our contestants from the contested races to come on up. And while they're doing that, I do want to share a slide here with you. As they're getting seated, one thing we want to make sure we cover is, for the audience and those watching at home, the duties and responsibilities of the City Council. So the duties and the responsibilities of the City Council, and this can be found on the city's website as well, but just to contradict or contrast it a little bit with what we talked about in the Mayor's Forum, sometimes we think the mayor is a law-making person or a position, and we forget that it's actually the work of the city council that will approve budgets, pass laws, make ordinances, approve contracts, that sort of thing. So just to give everybody a little bit of a context about what their job will be for those that are successful here. We also do want to just remind everybody about the Growth Management Act of 1990, because growth obviously is the paramount, or one of the paramount issues in Issaquah. I think we're all aware of that. And it's just nice for everybody to have a little context around what's been shaping that growth since 1990. This is kind of that umbrella law that was passed by the state legislature to tell cities and local municipalities more or less how they needed to grow. And what they have some wiggle room within those parameters, but this is just a nice reminder for everybody to have some background on that. And then finally, we looked at this at the last forum. This is the housing trend line for Issaquah. And the key thing to point out there in the big orange circle is that mark of 2018 where we will reach our housing target. That was not supposed to be reached until 2032, I believe. So we're well ahead of schedule of what the Growth Management Act says we need to grow by. So that's just a little, again, some context around where we stand with the rate of growth in Issaquah. So with that, I am going to introduce the candidates here, just some real quick information about each one. Then we're going to move into question and answers, and I have mixed up the order in which they will reply to questions, so everybody will get a chance to go first or second. We'll go ahead and get started with that after some introductions. I'm going to start with Chris Ray here. Chris has lived in Issaquah for more than 25 years, attended the University of Washington, earning a degree in economics, later an MBA from Seattle U. Chris is a principal consultant with Slalom Consulting in Seattle. In 2010, he took a little break from consulting to work with King County, help develop and implement and get funding for a lean continuous improvement program. He and his wife, Karen, live in Tallis. So let's give a welcome for Chris. Also next to Chris here is Brian Weinstein. Brian moved to Issaquah 17 years ago to raise his family. He's making his third attempt at running for city council. He also ran in 2003 and in 2007. He's a former CPA and CFO, now works for Microsoft in their artificial intelligence group. In 2016, he was appointed by the mayor and the city council to lead the official No campaign for the Issaquah Traffic Improvement Bond. So please help me welcome Brian. And in the next race for the following seat, we have Richard Swanson here. Richard worked for King 5 Television for over 10 years, Director of Marketing and Programming at King 5, so you may recognize him from his days there. Today he works as an independent media consultant. In 2015, he was elected president of the Bridges at Tallis Homeowners Association. He lives in Tallis with his wife, Lori. His daughter, Haley, and son, Michael, both attended Issaquah High School and are off to college. He holds a BA in political science from UCLA, and he's won 4 Emmy Awards and a CLIO Award. So please help me welcome Richard. And last but certainly not least, we have Mariah Batiste. Mariah was appointed by unanimous vote to the council in 2016 to fill a vacant seat. She is seeking re-election now to finish the 2 years remaining on that term. She's lived in Issaquah for 17 years, runs a consulting business here in Issaquah, served on the Council Land and Shore Committee last year, and this year serves on the Council's Safety and Services Committee. She currently serves on the board of directors for both the Economic Development Council of Seattle and King County, the Eastside Human Services Forum, representing the Sound Cities Association. And she's also served 3 years on the Issaquah Economic Vitality Commission, chair of the Issaquah Human Services Commission, and also volunteers with the PTSA. So please help me welcome Mariah. So at this point, I just want to take a brief moment. We talked about the duties of the city council. There was a great question brought up earlier about how do we choose who runs for which seat in Issaquah? All the seats in Issaquah are an at-large bid, so they represent all the constituencies of all areas of Issaquah. They're not broken up by geography. And they also get to choose which seat they're going to run for. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit for folks that maybe were uncertain about that. So we're going to go ahead and move into questions now. I am going to start off with Chris. So just to give you a heads up, we'll be starting with you. The first question has to do with growth. Anybody shocked by that? I think we're all aware Issaquah is a city with exploding growth, has been for quite a while. Why don't you tell us what your position is on how Issaquah has handled growth up to this point, and what do we need to do as a city going forward to manage growth out into the future? So Chris, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Nate. There's no doubt that the largest problem we face as a community is growth. There's a lot of really good work that's been done by the city council and the city to try and wrap their brains and our strategy around growth. The Central Issaquah Plan provided a very strong foundation for how to manage growth, something that we have to do. I'm going to disagree with Tola because my numbers say that King County is the fastest growing county in the United States right now and has been for 18 months. So we are dealing with growth not only as a city, but also as a region. Our challenge around the Central Issaquah Plan, and I think Stacy spoke to this, is the plan wasn't being implemented the way it was envisioned, and so hence the moratorium, which I think was the right thing to do. So if you make a plan and it's not working the way you want it to, you stop and you reevaluate. Going forward, what we have to do is we have to have a growth plan that meets the needs of the region. We have a commitment as a regional city to grow, but we also have to maintain the charm and character of the city of Issaquah. So what we can't do is develop the hillsides. I think that it's here in the beautiful Highlands, you've developed a lot. There's still a little bit left. But what we don't want to do is to look at opportunities to increase the density of the Highlands. The same for some of the other neighborhoods. We also don't want to be issuing development agreements for new high-density communities that are being built in marginal land. What we do want to do is encourage our developers to build in the appropriate places, which is really on the valley floor. So we've got a strong foundation for managing growth, but if we don't deliver on our plans, if we don't hold people accountable, and if we don't say no to developers who want to build where it is not appropriate for them to build, we will not have the city that we're looking for in the future.
Great. Next up is Brian.
Same question?
Same question, yeah.
Thank you. So as you saw on the slide above, we have met our 2030 population goal decades ahead of schedule. And with that comes a whole host of challenges as we continue to grow, because the growth isn't going to stop. But I believe that growth has to pay its own way. And among those things that growth must pay for are the infrastructure. We should have good streets. We should have good intersections that make sense. We should have the capacity on our roads that meets the density that is being planned for and that is being approved. But growth has to be cared for. Growth over here, growth over here. We've been growing all kinds of places all over town. If we don't take care of the growth and we don't manage it properly, don't make sure that it pays its way, brings the infrastructure and a community benefit, like a new swimming pool or another community center. Pretty soon, we're going to have so much growth, we're going to be like the crazy cat lady who can't afford to pay for all of her cats. And we're going to be the crazy house and growth person of the east side. I don't think that's possible. I don't think Issaquah is that kind of a place. We don't want to be that kind of a community. We want our growth to pay for itself, and we want it to bring the public benefit to us. I think that we can do better. I think some of the choices that the council has made regarding growth have been good. I do support the moratorium, but I think like everybody else here, we're very concerned about what's going to come on the other side of that moratorium. Are we going to have more of the same? Because I don't want to have a moratorium that the only thing that's changed is the look and feel of the architecture of buildings. We need to make sure that density is going to be in the right place, on the valley floor. And we need to insist that when a developer comes in and says, hey, I'd like to build another 1,000 units, we say that's going to be on the valley floor. And if they say no, we say no. And if they say it doesn't pencil out for me, then we'll say, fine, we can wait. I think we can do better, and I think that we should.
Thank you. Next up, just going in order here down the table, and again, we'll mix up responses. Richard, you're next.
So in 2015, King 5 was awarded the Service to America Award. And that's a high honor presented from the National Association of Broadcasters. We supported over 85 nonprofit organizations and attended over 100 community events in 2015. I didn't go to all of them, but trust me, I was a very busy guy in 2015. The experience that I had at King 5 taught me 3 valuable lessons. The first is to listen well. One of the 7 habits of highly effective people is first seek to understand before being understood. So active listening is a very important part of the process. The second is to ask hard questions. The hardest of all is the question, why? If you know the answer to the question why, the who's and the what's and the where's are much easier to respond to. And the third is to hold people accountable. When a decision is made, we've got to stick to that decision in order to see a plan and a vision through. Now, it's going to come as no surprise that I am also in favor of managing growth in the city of Issaquah. I think we all could agree that finding a pathway to a livable Issaquah is what we are all in favor for. But the thing that I want to distinguish my candidacy with is to try and answer the question, why? Because a city is not a bunch of streets and building permits and developers and stuff. It's a home. And a home has meaning beyond all of that. The charts and the graphs are all very interesting, but unless we can answer that question, why are we all together? Unless we can understand the shared values that make Issaquah a community, we're always going to struggle with the questions of how and where and who. And so until we can get those questions answered, that's going to be my goal, is to understand, to be your voice, to listen well, to actively listen to what you want to see, to understand that, put that into a mission, and then work towards creating a plan around that mission.
Thank you very much. And finishing up with the same question on growth is Mariah.
Thank you. I think that in terms of growth, we're really at a critical point in the city of Issaquah. I have, as I'm the newest city council member, I've had an opportunity to take a look. Day 2 on city council, I was put on the Land and Shore Committee, where I've just really had the opportunity to take a deep dive into a lot of the issues affecting growth, land use and the kinds of zoning that we have. I'm a big proponent of the Central Issaquah Plan. I really do believe that the growth that we have needs to be focused on the valley floor and within the Central Issaquah area. We don't necessarily have the zoning and the codes that align with that. And some are just, frankly, too vague, and we need to have more and detailed analysis around that. I would also say I also voted for the moratorium and was a strong proponent of the moratorium. The reason why is because we did need to take a pause. We are still getting a lot of development in areas that are not on the valley floor. And that doesn't coincide with the vision in terms of especially the Highlands. And in terms of housing and what we're talking about, it's all coming in as a result of housing. And I think that in the Highlands, we probably have as much housing as we want in this area. But that leads me to the last point, and that's just community engagement. I'm really passionate about finding out what the feedback is from each community so we can better understand and make those critical changes as we go forward.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to now go ahead and we're going to start with Richard and Mariah, and then we're going to come back this way. Sticking,
It's really complex.
got to make sure we rotate it. So sticking with the topic of growth, but related to the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement that will expire at the end of this year. What is your vision for the next phase of development in the Highlands after the development agreement expires? And even though it is still designated as a receiving site for more building, what are your plans as a council member to address that? And we're going to go ahead and start with Richard and then Mariah.
Well, I think this is a subject that everyone in this room is very interested in. Without question, the Issaquah Highlands is a spectacular community. In fact, if you really look at Issaquah, we're kind of a confederation of different communities trying to mingle together as one city. So Issaquah Highlands in and of itself is its own special place. I'm sure all of you made decisions to live up here for very specific reasons, and I think that a better understanding of what those reasons are and the kind of community that you want to live in is really critical in order to make decisions about where we go from here. I was somewhat critical of the City Council for their decision recently to give away a large parcel of land in Issaquah Highlands that went to a very dense building development. It's the kind of thing that there were good reasons for it, I'm sure, and I'm sure Mariah's got her reasons for voting in favor of it. Again, I'm not trying to run in opposition to Mariah necessarily, but I think a better understanding of what the Highlands wants to be would allow us to make better decisions about how to manage the growth. Without a doubt, Issaquah in general is going to grow. There's 1,000 new jobs being created in Amazon alone in downtown Seattle every single month. These people need strong communities to live in. We have to provide those communities, or there's going to be a traffic jam up the 90 to the very next fork in the road. And so better understanding the growth prospects that this community can handle and wants to see is really critical in order to make a good decision.
Great, thank you. And then we're going to follow up with Brian here on the same question.
Thank you. I don't know if you can tell from my tan, but I just came back from a week's stay in Cabo San Lucas. And one of the great things about going to Cabo is if you have one of those all-expense-paid vacations, you can eat a lot. The Highlands has eaten a lot, and it's time for them to digest. I'm going to repeat myself a lot during this forum here. So here I go again. We've met our 2030 population goal decades ahead of schedule. I think the Highlands is done. I don't want to see any more growth in the Highlands because I think it's time for something else to come to the Highlands, some things that have been promised for a long time. The retail, the commercial, the schools, the jobs that were promised, the parks, the trails. This is the time now to look at the growth that's taken place in the Highlands and say, what were the amenities that were promised to the people who moved here? And where are they? Are they everywhere that they're supposed to be? Are they in the pipeline being started? I think if we look around, we can see the Highlands is a great, wonderful, beautiful community. But there are things that are missing. And even though I came back from an all-I-could-eat vacation, and the Highlands represents a fantastic place where you too can live and have all of these great things and amenities, a lot of them just aren't there. The city has gorged itself, if you will, I'm going to continue with the metaphor, at the buffet of growth in the Highlands, and all they've eaten is the dessert. Now it's time to pay the bill and bring in the things that make the community whole. I think that that's probably the best thing that I could say about what my vision is for the Highlands. It's a hard question to answer in 2 minutes, but I'm going to be direct and I'm going to be honest. I think the Highlands is a great place. I didn't choose to live here because I found a cheap house in Old Town, but what my vision for the Highlands is, it's not quite there yet, and I think we need to do better for the people who are here.
Thank you, and I apologize, Mariah, I skipped over you. I looked at the wrong section of my notes here, so I'm going to go back and let Mariah.
I was in the way.
I'm going to go back and let Mariah have her time to answer this question as well.
So in regard to the end of the development agreement for the Highlands, I really want to hear from everyone in the Highlands. I want to have the community be engaged and talk about what they would like to see when that development agreement comes to an end. I think that when a contractual agreement comes to an end, especially a big development agreement like we have in the Highlands, it can be a little bit confusing. What it really boils down to is what the zoning is going to look like. I would be a proponent of having the zoning stay the same. If there are 5 houses on this block and the zoning would stay the same for 5 houses on that block. But I would really like to hear more from the community in terms of what they would like to see. I know the city has been doing a good job in terms of outreach and employee engagement around that. Keith Niven, the Director of Development, and his team, I know that there's still time to have engagement around that, and I really would like to hear, because there are some critical issues surrounding the zoning. There's also transfer of development rights, which was brought up a little bit earlier. Transfer of development rights protect open space. Developers have the right to buy those and then use those in a different area. The Highlands is still listed as a receiving site. So from a legal perspective, the Highlands is listed as a receiving site right now. Does the Highlands want to continue to be listed as a receiving site? Those are the kinds of things and the kind of community engagement that I would want to hear about, because I really think, especially in terms of housing, that the Highlands is at capacity. Again, I'm a big proponent of focusing housing and growth on the valley floor, but there's still a lot to hear from the community, and I would like to hear from you.
Great, thank you very much. And so now we'll come back to Chris on the same question in the Highlands.
Batting cleanup on the Highlands question. The Highlands Development Agreement is not the only development agreement that is expiring. The Talus Development Agreement is expiring also, and I live in Talus, so I'm going to do a little bit of juxtaposition here, because I know how I feel about the Talus Development Agreement and when it goes away, because when I moved into Talus, I had certain expectations about what the future would look like. And I bet you when you moved to the Highlands, you also had some expectations about what the future would look like. So as we start to look at and wrapping up the development agreement in Talus, the critical thing is to maintain the character of this neighborhood that you bought into, that you moved into, that you wanted to be a part of. So I am a big proponent in the Highlands of maintaining the underlying zoning. So if we're zoned a certain way right now on a certain parcel, we maintain that underlying zoning. We maintain the quality and character of the neighborhoods that are here. And I got to agree with Mariah wholeheartedly. This is a question for you, the residents of the Highlands, to help answer. It's like, what would you like to see your neighborhood become? The role of the city council is to advocate for you, is to be your voice and to synthesize the different points of view coming from all of you into something that we can then turn into a plan to move forward so that you get the community that you want to live in.
Great, thank you very much. So now we're going to rotate a little bit into the topic of traffic and transportation, which we all know is also goes hand in hand with growth. So as a council member, what 3 specific transportation improvement projects would you prioritize, and how do we pay for them? And we are going to start with Brian.
Okay, traffic. Well, we need to be honest about traffic. We need to be honest about the density that we've brought into our town and the lack of capacity that we have with our roads. Barring a huge amount of money that I don't know where it's going to come from, there really isn't a lot we can do to increase the capacity of the roads that we have. Now, we know there's 30,000 cars and trucks a day that come from out the region that pass through Issaquah. So one of the things I'd like to do is talk to the state, what's happening with Highway 18, talk to King County, what's happening with Issaquah Hobart Road. That's one, two. The third thing is, what are we going to do here with the traffic that we own and we're responsible for in the city of Issaquah? Every time we approve a new development, whether it be on the valley floor or in the Highlands or Talus, that adds more density, those are additional cars and trucks that we are putting on the road. The traffic bond that we looked at last year, one of the things that talked about was, what are we going to do to solve some of our traffic problems? And the reason that bond failed was because many of us felt that the city wasn't honest with us. Where's this money going to come from? Well, it comes from our pocketbooks. What is it going to actually be used to pay for? Until the city, and if I'm on the city council, I will make this possible, can be completely honest and transparent about where the money has been going, that it was supposed to pay for all the traffic improvements, I don't think we need to even consider the option of what we're going to pay for and how we're going to pay for it. I think we need to be transparent first, regain some of the trust that maybe has been lost, and then let's talk about some of those choices that we may have to make that may be painful. But let's do that later. Let's get back to the transparency and honesty first.
Thank you. And Chris?
We can do a second this time, huh? I agree with Brian wholeheartedly, particularly as it relates to the last traffic bond. It wasn't a solution to the problems we had, and I think it went down in flames because it didn't address the problems that we have. I want to make 2 points. One is we have some immediate problems that we have to take care of, and there are things that we can do internally. My good friend Mary Lynch has been talking a lot about intelligent signaling, which is really interesting and something we haven't done, but Bellevue has done intelligent signaling, and they've seen throughput increases on some of their intersections of in excess of 38% more cars per unit of time. So there are things that we can do by applying technology to some of our problems. I think we need to look for how do we reroute intra-Issaquah traffic so that we are moving cars more effectively through Issaquah as opposed to getting jammed up in the pass-through traffic. We need to partner with King County. They are our partners. We talked a little bit about impact fees that we assess on development. One of the things that we don't factor into our impact fees that we could is the cost of the interconnecting roads. So is that we have development in Issaquah or we have development in Covington, we should be looking at ways to assess impact fees so that we can build out the interconnecting roads that are not either Covington or Issaquah. So there are some opportunities for improvement there. And then kind of on the short term, we have to fix the I-90-18 interchange, make it possible for people who are trying to go down to Maple Valley and to Covington to not get jammed up there and feel like their best path is through Issaquah. The final point I want to make is we need to fix today's problems, but that's not enough. We have to take a step back and we have to start looking at the future, and we need to start positioning ourselves to address tomorrow's problems too. We should be looking 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road so that we're not in the same place when I'm up for re-election.
Intra-Issaquah traffic, say that 10 times fast.
Yeah.
We're going to go down to Mariah here to answer this question about traffic.
So traffic has just become such a huge problem in Issaquah, and I think I and so many people in the community just really feel that pain every day. I think that when I think about traffic, I think it really falls into two sort of distinct buckets. One is what we're doing regionally. We have to be looking regionally because our neighbors in southeast King County and Maple Valley and Black Diamond and Covington, we have a lot of pass-through traffic coming through our city that's adding to the traffic that we already have, simply because some of the routes that those people could be taking are not attractive to them. There's too much traffic on those roads, and those roads haven't been improved. So we have to look at this from a regional approach in terms of working with, partnering with Southeast King County in terms terms of the state, looking at the Highway 18 and the interchange with 18 and I-90, looking at 169 Maple Valley Highway, and then looking at our borders in our town and working with the county as well on Highway 900 and Issaquah Hobart Road. In the other bucket is the local approach and being able to really think outside the box. I don't think that there's anything that would come before me as a council member in regard to traffic that I wouldn't take a long, hard look at and really research. I think that there are engineering and design, signaling. We talked a little bit about the intelligence signaling. I think there's a lot of work that even tolling has come up. There's a lot of work that could be done locally, and I would be willing to take a look at all of that. But I want to hop back to the regional side of things. I think we also have to be really careful about solutions that come forward. Because if those solutions are going to improve flow on some of those highways, but yet add more cars to the middle of Issaquah, then that may not be the best route for us to go. So I think we just have to take a lot of due diligence and look into each one of these issues.
Thank you. And to finish up on that topic, Richard.
Well, this is a really difficult question. I mean, nothing gets the blood pressure like traffic. And at King 5, we spent an entire year and did an in-depth investigation on traffic problems throughout our entire region. And trust me when I tell you, there are no answers in the pipeline, I'm sorry to say. Here in our little community, there are three main problems. We've all talked about the I-90 18 interchange. That's a terrible interchange. Trucks, cars, people going to them, they don't want to do that, so they cut through downtown Issaquah, causing traffic bumper to bumper. People going to Sammamish have no other way to get there but to travel through your community. And then, of course, down 900, people avoiding at all costs having that I-90 405 interchange, so they cut down 900 into Renton. These are systemic, long-term problems that don't have simple press play and enter kind of solutions to them. They're expensive, they involve regional governments and regional management jurisdictions that you're gonna have to lobby hard, you're gonna have to press hard. Nobody's got any money to spend. It's not gonna happen fast. But I will say this, I'm with Chris and I'm with Mariah. I think that what we need to do is take the resources we do have and get creative. There are technological innovations that we can look at. There are other sort of smaller traffic circle projects that we can undertake that may mitigate some of the smaller day-to-day hassles, and also look to the future where, with autonomous driving, who knows what traffic is going to look like 10 years from now. It's really hard to make long-term plans like we're all going to be driving Toyotas down the freeway in 10 years. It may all look a little bit different than what we're expecting today. So that would be, that's where I am.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to move over to a topic on the Central Issaquah Plan. And it's been alluded to here a few times tonight already about the Central Issaquah Plan. But for those who don't know, this was a plan passed in 2012 by the City Council, which was going to lay out the vision for the redevelopment of the valley floor over the next 30 years. And in 2016, the council passed a temporary moratorium, and then a few weeks back extended that through to the end of the year. So in your opinion, was extending this moratorium the right move, and why? And then also, in the long term, what do you think specifically needs to happen to the Central Issaquah Plan so that it will fully develop and unfold the way it was envisioned? And we're going to start with Richard on this one.
Well, I am, pressing pause with that moratorium was the smartest thing that ever happened. I was recruited by some neighbors in our neighborhood. I'm president of our little homeowners association, and I was recruited by some neighbors to run for city council because growth got out of hand in our little community. We had a landslide up in Tallis. We have a plastic mountain up there. Maybe many of you are aware of that. Maybe you've got friends up there. It was a result of there being too much growth, too quickly. And so part of the reason why I'm running is to ask the hard questions as city council to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen. And I completely lost my train of thought. How about that for transparency? What was the question? What's the topic?
What specifically do you think needs to change in the Central Issaquah plan?
So when I learned that there was a pause in the development process, I was a big fan of that, because without a doubt, the city council doesn't have the answers they need in order to manage the growth that we've got. And we can't put up drawbridges on exit 15, 16, and 17. Growth is going to come. And we haven't asked the hard questions about who we are as a community. We don't know the why of why we are all here. If we knew that why, figuring out the answers to the growth questions would be much easier. So I'm a big fan of the moratorium. I think that there's a lot more research that we need to do to listen to all of you, to get a better understanding of what you want from your community, what you want from downtown Issaquah, the kind of place you want to call home. When we have that understanding, we're going to communicate it vigorously to all of you, make sure we've got it right. And then then and only then, when we feel like we've got it right, well, questions like how big should the parking lot at Target be the kind of thing that can be answered. In the meantime, it's just a bunch of circles and charts on a graph without a lot of human meaning attached to it.
Thank you. And Mariah, as a follow-up.
So I voted for the moratorium, and I voted to extend the moratorium for very specific reasons in terms of we really were not seeing, with the vision of the Central Issaquah plan, we really were not seeing that come to fruition. And we really needed to focus in, take a pause, and take a look at why the growth wasn't coming on the valley floor, why we were still getting and allowing growth in other areas. The moratorium is very focused on the Central Issaquah plan. There are elements of it in terms of affordable housing, in terms of architectural fit and design, in terms of parking. There are a lot of elements to a work plan that has been developed. So I would say that there's some very specific work that has been done and is being done right now. Work plans that are being developed, we have timelines that go along with that, and so we can see what we're moving through and how quickly we're moving through it, so we can get that coding and the zoning to focus on the kind of character that we want in Central Issaquah, and we're not done. And so thus the extension. We really need the time to get through all of these different work plans so we can really focus on what the Central Issaquah plan needs to be. Beyond the moratorium, more work I think probably needs to be done in terms of the Central Issaquah plan. That will continue. And then we also have some bigger questions in terms of infrastructure, in terms of concurrency, and in terms of some other big, broad issues that are going to come our way. But this was a very particular pause that needed to be taken. The zoning and the language around all of the land use really needed to be looked at, and we really need to get focused on the valley floor and not the outside areas like the Highlands.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move to Chris.
I think the Central Issaquah plan is a brilliant piece of work. It's a really good idea. It is the right thing for Issaquah. I think the execution on the Central Issaquah plan has been abysmal. I think the Gateway project was poorly conceived. I think the Atlas project was poorly conceived. I think the moratorium was the right thing to do to get our feet underneath us, figure out where we should go, and how do we get the Central Issaquah plan back in the place that we always envisioned it would be. I was at a meeting the other day, and Keith Niven, who's the Director of Development for the City of Issaquah, said, and I quote, "This is a very desirable place to live. There is no difficulty in getting people to develop here." And yet, Corey Christensen shared this with me a couple years ago. He said, "You know, we feel like we're the ugly princess, and we are really desperate." And so as we move forward with the Central Issaquah plan, we need to have a clear vision of what the plan is. We have to recognize that we're not the ugly princess. We are very desirable. And we need to ensure that when people want to develop in Issaquah, that they develop in such a way that we maintain the character and charm of this city, that we are not being kowtowed by developers who say, well, I think, Brian, this was you that said this, it doesn't pencil out, so, well, that's your problem, that's not my problem. So if it doesn't make sense, we don't do it. And what we really need from you all going forward is your input on how to evolve this central Issaquah plan. And that's not us having a meeting and dragging you down to City Hall and letting you talk at us and us talk at you. That is us meeting you where you live so that we can come out here and understand what is important to you. And one of my key objectives is we need to have a city government that is more engaged with the community and that we are actually meeting you where you live and engaging with you so we can understand your needs and deliver on those needs.
Great, thank you. And Brian, to finish up on that topic.
Thank you. So yes, I do support the Central Issaquah plan. I do think it's a great idea. And yes, I did support the moratorium. I think that is needed. So what comes after the moratorium? What happens to the Central Issaquah after that? Well, the first thing we have to do is, as a city council, we have to insist that when a developer comes and says, I'd like to put more housing down in the Central Issaquah, we say, you have to bring the infrastructure with it, and it has to pencil out for us as a community. Are we getting vital services from what's coming in? Are we getting support for the water that we're going to have to pipe over there? Are we getting support for our sewers that we're going to have to build? And everything else, like police, fire, safety, and the schools. All of this needs to be considered. We haven't done a good job in considering those things in the past. With the Central Issaquah plan post-moratorium, we should be insisting that all these things be part of the growth that's going to come there. And like Chris said, like I said, the developer who says, it just doesn't pencil out for us. Maybe you could give us some property. Maybe you could throw in a couple $1 million. My answer is no. That's your problem. As a city, we need to insist that what we have to give for spurring growth in the places where we want to target it, the most precious things we have are resources of land and money. The highest and best use of the land that we own in the city of Issaquah shouldn't just be given away because a developer can't make their project pencil out for us. The council has to take a strong stand on that, and that's something that I will absolutely insist on. Development in the Central Issaquah plan post-moratorium has to pay its own way. I'm not a very artsy person. I can't tell you if one color of blue or tan, you can see what I'm wearing, it doesn't really match. I can't tell you if the colors are going to be appropriate in the Central Issaquah plan. That really is up to citizens and committees as part of the city council to figure that out. And yes, we should go out and be meeting you and trying to understand what your needs are there.
Thank you very much. So for the sake of time, we're going to have one last question, and then we'll have our candidates give us a little bit of closing thoughts as we wrap up tonight. So we're going to move over to the topic of the city budget. Running a vibrant city and providing essential services obviously takes tax revenue. What are your thoughts on the current level of taxation in Issaquah? Where do we need to increase or decrease taxation? And what would be your highest priority come budget season for the city? We're going to go ahead and start with Richard on this one.
I started before. Is it my turn to start?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that the essential services, the first thing you got to do is you got to baseline a budget, right? What are the essential services? What are the things you have to have? You have to have police and fire. You have to have park and recreation department. You've got to fund all of the essential services that go into making the city a vibrant place. Those have to be baseline budgeted every single year. That doesn't mean that's an automatic increase or an automatic decrease, but you take a look from one year to the next exactly where the budget is and where it needs to go to achieve the goal. From there, you look at other services that you want to invest in. We've talked a lot about growth and how to manage growth. I think that we're going to need to spend some money trying to better understand what the community wants. I don't think there's been enough community outreach, enough understanding around all of that. That requires work, free work from city council members and from political candidates. But I think getting some professional services to better define who we are as a community, describe the shared values, describe the goals, that's an essential part of any budget. The other thing is, you know, it's an old saying, if you watch the nickels, the dollars take care of themselves. I really do think that having a keen eye on spending from day to day, the day-to-day spending that goes on inside of a government. There is a lot of go along to get along that comes on in city government, a lot of, if you will, complacency around money that we spend. I think that there's nothing more important we do as a city council than make sure the money we spent is spent on the priorities.
Thank you, Richard. Time's up there. I'm going to move over to Mariah now.
So I think in our last budgeting session, we made some great strides, made a lot of changes, and I think a lot of those changes were really based on some really tough questions that came both from the community and the council members. But I still think that we have a lot of work to do in terms of both transparency and strategic planning. Looking through the budgets and having sat through a complicated budgeting session, there are so many competing priorities and never enough money, which is always the story as you're going through budgeting, really no matter where you are. But I think that there is a lot of tax fatigue right now, especially after ST3. Tola talked a little bit about the arts bond not going through and some other levies that might be coming up. I think that we really need to be creative in terms of how we're looking at some of the projects. We have some critical infrastructure projects that really need to be worked on. So again, I think looking at really creative solutions for raising money in a different way, being able to do strategic planning so we can really take those, listen to the community, through community engagement, try to prioritize what projects are the most important, and then creatively look at how could we get those projects done. Thank you.
All right, and then Brian, I'll let you go next.
Thank you. So one of the slides that Nathan put up at the beginning said that a member of the city council basically does two things. One, you create policy. Two, you look at the budget. As a former certified public accountant and a chief financial officer of a big company, looking at the budget is going to be one of the best fun things I can possibly do because that's going to be your money, and I'm going to say I have a fiduciary responsibility to you. I'm just going to come out right now and say that. It's your money, and I'm going to treat it like it's your money respectfully and make sure it gets spent only on things that you yourself would want to see in the community. That being said, our continued community debate is always about growth and traffic, and it shouldn't be anymore. We should be talking about where we're going to put our next swimming pool, where we're going to put our third community center, or where we're going to put a new teen center, someplace real that's going to help our teen and our youth, not some decrepit old house at the corner of 2nd and Bush that's only 1,000 square feet. These are the things that we should be talking about. And instead, we're stuck in this sort of regime of continuing to talk about the problems of traffic and growth. I want to know why, with all the growth that we've had, the city hasn't collected enough impact fees to pay for all these amenities that we expect and should have been promised a long time ago here in the city of Issaquah. So I'm going to be looking very carefully at the budget. And in areas where we need to raise revenue from developers and those who are coming into our town who can afford to pay these things, I'm going to look at that very closely. Where we have expenses and inefficiencies in our city government, you bet I'm going to look at that. And I'm not going to say you're fired, but I'm going to say let's try and do better. Let's try and do better for the people that we are trying to represent. All of you, the people right here, because it's your money. And if it comes to the point that someone says, we just don't have enough, well, then we're going to have to look at what painful questions we have to ask about how do we raise more money. But I don't think we're there yet.
Thank you, Brian. Time is up on that. And Chris, go ahead and same question.
Great, thanks, Nate. When Nate did my little intro, he mentioned that I was a consultant. What he didn't say was that I've spent the last 20-some years as a management consultant working with state and local governments across the country. And that's actually what led me to my brief stint with King County. I have a passion for great government, and one of the things that I really want to see some leadership from the City Council on is operational excellence coming out of the City of Issaquah. I believe we should commit to being the best run city of our size in the country. I don't think it is reasonable, I don't think it is fair, I don't think it is right to ask for more tax dollars until we can tell you that we are spending every dollar that we get from you in the most appropriate way possible. Now, there are some priorities that I think we need to focus on, and the first one is public safety. As we grow, we talk about roads and we talk about parks, but the biggest challenge that we are going to face, and this is being forward-looking, is going to be about public safety. As the city starts to grow and we increase density, we will have increases in property crime, and the only way to do this is to get ahead of it before it becomes a problem. Also, we live in a tech-savvy community. This is a tech hub, and I would really like to see the city invest more in how to use technology, how to use what's available, so that we can better engage with the community. I know that in Newcastle, they have done some amazing things around smartphones and citizen engagement. And then finally, I would like to see the city modernize. I've spent a lot of time talking to city staff, and we operate in a very solidly 1960s operating model. And I think we could at least make it into the early 21st century. It is not fair for the city to ask you to provide more money until we can guarantee you that we are spending every dollar that you give us in the best possible way.
Thank you very much. And so to wrap up here, I'm going to have each candidate give us just a little bit of a closing statement, but I'm also going to morph in a little bit of a question that came in from the community. So I think we heard a lot about why you guys are running and your key issues, but as you give us your closing remarks, weave in a little bit about your method of collaboration and your ability to serve in this role, taking a lot of time and energy and all those other things. So in your closing remarks, I would encourage you to include that. And I'm going to start with Mariah, and we're just going to work our way back this way.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you to everyone for coming out to this candidate forum. It's just fantastic, great way to engage, and I look forward to meeting a lot of you and hearing more from you. For 17 years, Issaquah has been my home. I am a new, just moved up to the Highlands, so I'm really excited to be here. I think that what's critical to me is we have so much going on. We're at a critical point in the city's just looking into the future, and we really want to be able to maintain that small town charm. So the big little city that Justin talked about, I think is very true, and it is a critical time. And I think that we need to have leaders in place that really love the city and that want to take the time to do the hard work to make sure that everything that's in place, that we can really align the values that we have with what the city is going to look like in the future. I guess the question was asked about collaboration, and I think that I have really had the capability to collaborate across both with all of the city council members, the administration, and all of the staff, as well as done a lot of work regionally so I could really understand. City Council it takes a lot of time, and it's a really important job, but it's not just about sitting and voting at a City Council meeting. It's about going to the committees, doing a deep dive, working with the administration, working with other council members, going to regional committees and boards and reporting back. And really taking the time to understand what all of the commissions are doing. There's so many different aspects to it, and I think that it's a good time to have leaders that really understand the city across a very broad spectrum. And I would be really honored to have your vote in November. I'm the newest city council member, and I would love to have the opportunity to do all that hard work, and I'm ready to do those deep dives. Thank you.
Well, thank you all again for tonight. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to all of us. Please find me on Facebook. The last name is Swanson, like the TV dinners. Take a read of my post for tonight, and if you like it, please share it with your friends. I want to be an open ear to anything you have to say. I'll respond to your comments, and hopefully we can continue a dialogue online. I'd look forward to that. One thing I'd like to say in my closing remarks is, I am not running against Mariah, even though she is my opponent in this campaign because of the silly way we select the ballot. We measure out the ballot. I ended up opposing Mariah for the seat that she occupies, seat number 2. But I'm not running against her. I don't know her well, but she seems like a very fine, very kind person. And so I want to make that clear. But what I am running for is a seat at the table. I think that, there has been a complacency that has braced City Council over the past couple of years. I think the growth has been a stunner for everyone. I think the mayor's had some health issues, and I think as a result, the City Council has made a couple of boo-boos along the way, including the landslide that we had up in Tallis. I'm in favor of the moratorium until we make better decisions. But I'd like a seat at the table, and I promise you I will bring energy and creativity to that seat if you'll give it to me. I also want to make a little news tonight, if you will. I'm here to publicly endorse Mary Lou Pauley for mayor. We're down to 2 candidates. I've spent time with both candidates. Mary Lou is smart as a whip. She's well-informed. She's got a ton of energy, and I would support her. In fact, I do support her for her run as mayor. But she's going to need a person like me at the other end of the table, asking the hard questions, listening to all of you, and holding people accountable for the decisions that we make together.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I ask for your vote.
Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here. When I moved to Issaquah 17 years ago, all I wanted to do was sit in my little house and just live. I didn't want to get involved in politics. But somebody told me they were going to build the equivalent of a freeway at the end of my block, and that was the Southeast Bypass. And having come from Los Angeles, California, I just couldn't believe that anybody would want to make that happen. And so I got involved in the community. And one of the things that I've learned is that you have to have collaboration, cooperation, communication, and consideration when you're talking with all the people in your neighborhood and beyond your neighborhood to get something done. I've been involved as an advocate for Issaquah residents since around 2003, so many of you probably already know me pretty well. I'm running because I think the voice of the people, the Issaquah resident, has been missing from a lot of the decisions that have been made on our city council. And I would like to be there to advocate for the people who live in Issaquah, the people who live here now, not the ones who don't live here yet, but the people who live here now. That's why I'm running. I would welcome the opportunity to be on the council, to receive your vote. But even if not, I think if there's something I could do to help you get done in the community, I would think that that would be a privilege, and it would be my honor to help you get that done. I look forward to your vote in November. I have a website, BW4, it's the number 4, because I used to be an accountant, bw4issaquah.com. Any questions? You know where I live. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then to wrap things up here, Chris.
I think the most important thing in building a community is engagement. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for engaging. Mariah, Rick, Brian, thank you guys, because this is not, this is a lot of work. And I think it's great that we have people who want to get engaged. I want this to be the start of our conversation. This isn't the end of the conversation. So if you would be so kind as to elect me in November, my pledge to you is that I will keep coming back here. You will get tired of me before we get back to the next election cycle. So my career has really been all about helping governments become great. And it really occurred to me, and it's one of the reasons that I ran, is I really love Issaquah, and I'm in a position right now where I have a chance to give a little bit back to this community. So I am deeply committed to giving what I know and giving back to this community that I call home. I have worked with some very, very difficult clients around the country. I've worked with some very difficult government agencies, and I've been very successful because I'm a really good listener. And so listening is an interesting skill to develop because most people are talking about issues from their perspective. And so the challenge in building consensus is to really figure out how to understand the very different perspectives and to focus on what the common ground is. It's really, in the final analysis, this whole election is about you. It's about engaging with you, it's about advocating for you, and it's about helping you build the city that you want to live in. I would so appreciate your support and vote in November. I have no imagination like Brian, so my website is chrisray.com, all one word. And thank you, and again, thank you for being here. Nate, thank you for doing a spectacular job on the
You're very welcome. So let's have a round of applause for our candidates here. So as we wrap things up, just a few closing comments. Again, look for the video to be both on the Issaquah TV channel on Comcast as well as on the YouTube channel. Be sure you share this video with those who couldn't be here tonight. And I just personally want to say that in this day and age of politics, we all know things can be ugly, they can be nasty, and it's very divisive in this world. So it's extremely refreshing to come down here to this level, at the city level, and hear from quality folks who are here that just want to make your city a better place. And I don't know that you're going to find a political forum where I have this much agreement and acknowledgement of others' opponents and their goodwill. So thank you guys to the candidates for bringing that to the table. I think it's very much appreciated by Issaquah. So again, thank you all for being here tonight, and have a great rest of your night. Thank you.